Hi there, I'm James Frampton and I work for Comply Serve Ltd. Today I'm going to be taking you through a demonstration of our tender assessment activity for our product ComplyPro. ComplyPro has many different activities available, and indeed custom activities can be built and structured on request in addition. I'll have a look a little bit further now at some of the capabilities, but the focus of this particular demonstration will be around our tender assessment function. Let me just click through now. Okay, so here you're seeing a typical home page inside ComplyPro. You'll see that there's several sort of different starter activities that could be used, and indeed bespoke activities that can be created. So things like specification development, building a raft of stakeholder requirements and deriving those out into a more of a detailed technical design. Then of course this module where we're going to be looking at putting these work packages of requirements out to tender, inviting bidders to respond to that tender electronically, responding to and promoting clarification questions as necessary, and looking at the the client's assessment of those responses. Then you could imagine that tender being awarded. Let's just say this was for a build. Then the company delivering that build, who had obviously won the tender, could then be progressively assessed for their compliance throughout the delivery. And in addition, there's several other sort of modules and activities that support the overall project process. These could be sort of around issues and assumptions, or change management, risk and hazard management, with countermeasure and mitigations being recorded and obviously logged back to requirements through changes. So there's lots of other things that ComplyPro can do. I'll focus in this one on our tender assessment module, and before just doing that, let's go forwards now and just consider a few of the main issues around some of these modules in the real life world. So a key one here is the multiple sources of information. The counter of that is obviously having a single source of truth. When you've got a big supply chain, potentially got many companies and many people within each of those companies, and several other stakeholders being involved in the overall project. Now, in this day and age, we have emails, we have telephones, faxes, we have bits of paper being printed out, Excel sheets, Word documents, PDFs. We have a huge number of ways in which information can be stored and can be sent around and accessed. One of the problems that comes from that is where you've got multiple sources of this truth, and it becomes a bit dislocated. One person may not have the latest document or have the latest information to hand. Somebody may have changed something, having looked at it that particular morning, that's key to somebody else knowing about that. So having a system where the information is single, and all access to that information, albeit through different access rules and rights and different views on that data, so that it's appropriate to the user, is obviously going to be a good thing. That stems through a bit further to the second point here, to the relevancy of information that's being presented. Giving someone a document 100 pages thick, of which only 2 or 3 pages of that is relevant to themselves. Obviously, the things that are relevant, especially if they're dispersed through the overall document, can get overlooked and aren't as visible as they should be. So by using a system like ComplyPro, you can give access to only the relevant information for the particular user who's logging in, so they only see what they need to see and can focus their attention on that without it getting diluted by vast volumes of other information. We mentioned already a large number of people and groups of people with a vested interest in a project, so we can think of that as the supply chain potentially. Being able to integrate the supply chain is a good thing. You can integrate a supply chain, I suppose, by sending emails to everybody, by printing things out and giving it to them, but being able to integrate the supply chain a little bit more professionally by giving everyone who needs access to an electronic software as a service based system that doesn't rely upon a physical local network for an installed bit of software to live on, is going to allow everybody who needs to get access to the project information at the right time, at the right place, with the right access and relevancy placed on top of it. Taking that further, and I suppose quite specific to this tender assessment, is as and when responses come through from the bidders, this can be done progressively, not obviously just based on a physical document that they can come up with responses to and submit that on X date of X month of X number of months in the future. So progressive response, as far as tender goes, is at such time as each response is submitted, and that could be response to each statement as opposed to response to an entire tender or an ITT. So being able to do things progressively is good. Of course, capturing an audit trail is imperative in this day and age. We see everyone suing everyone else, in this culture. It's good to be able to have evidence of who has said what, accepted what, changed what, done what, and when, and as authorised by who. So the entire audit trail captured is captured in ComplyPro for all activities concerned. And lastly, some summary reporting. We can capture all of this, but in this day and age where people are particularly busy, management by exception is by far the norm. So being able to pull out sets of metrics and other types of dashboards from the detailed sets of data that is inside the overall system is imperative, and ComplyPro allows you to do that. So I'm going to go into the live product now and actually have a look through some examples of tender assessment. I'll just switch my screens across, if you bear with me. Here we go. So you'll have to imagine now that we're going to be logged in at various points as different stakeholders. Okay. Here we've got three types of user. We've got the client, who's putting out these tenders, or offering out these tenders. We have two responders, bidder 1 and bidder 2. You'll see at the top of the screen here that I've got, we call them activity buttons. So I've got lots of activity buttons here, and some of these are relevant to different types of user. Now, to save me logging on and off many times during this demonstration, I've given myself this user access to, basically I've called myself the client and bidder 1 and bidder 2 all in one. So I'm quite a busy chap, of course. Wouldn't make sense in the real world. However, for this example, it'll let me click to different activities and simulate being different people without having to log on and off. So do bear with that as we go through. So what you're seeing here is a typical screen of ComplyPro. There's many different layouts, about 23 or 24 now of the screen, in vertical and horizontal, and different types of screen sections in different arrangements. This is a fairly typical view of ComplyPro, just a standard grid and link screen where we've got a table at the top, and we've got potentially multiple tabs of linked data at the bottom, which we'll see a bit further as we go through this presentation. Going straight into the system, I've landed in this case, as you can see, the highlighted activity being the tender client view, at a set of metrics. So here I'm looking at my program of tenders that are currently being put out there. I've got 6 different work packages. I've got the detail in here for one of those that we're going to look through today, but I can see the the actual progress of all of these in a set of metrics where there's obviously detailed data beneath each one. So very quickly, I'm now going to click across onto the actual assessment progress for work package 1 as far as the client is concerned. So if I click through, you'll see I've actually now got another set of metrics. Now, this set of metrics, however, is just relevant to work package 1. So I've kind of drilled through from a program summary to a work package summary. I can see the overall progress for this particular package, and I can also see summaries of both bidder 1 and bidder 2's responses at this point in time, both their current scoring and their current compliance to the tender specification. Now, I can obviously go further now as the client into these into these sets of data. I'll quickly go through to the assessment progress, and just so you can see the overall screen. Now, pay attention to the fact that we've now got different tabs at the bottom to show bidder 1's and bidder 2's responses, and indeed clarification questions. As and when I select a different line item at the top, or a different statement of assessment criteria, the actual response for either bidder 1 or bidder 2 can be seen by selecting the tab at the bottom. Obviously, summary of the scoring and the compliance level to the for both bidder 1 and bidder 2 can be seen in this table at the top, with sections and totals being automatically calculated for you. Lastly, on the end here is the clarification questions, their current statuses, where they've been proposed, and where they're what status they're currently at in their workflow. I'm going to actually go out of the client view now, and we'll go to a similar screen, but we're going to pretend to be bidder 1 now. So if I click across to my bidder 1 activity, this is obviously all that bidder 1 would see, and the view is very similar to the client view. I was mentioning a moment ago about a single source of truth. It's the same set of data with a different view and access control imposed on that data relevant to bidder 1 here. So as bidder 1, here's a question I've answered earlier, so to speak, and Q21. Here's one that I haven't yet responded to, which I'm going to do now. Before I do respond to question 21, let's just have a look at my response to question 20 and see what that's about. So my response to question 20, you can see up here that I've been marked as being compliant, that I've been given a score of 3. Now, it's quite important that to realise that you can't self-score. If I double click in here, it's greyed out, so don't forget I'm in as bidder 1 now, so the bidder can't obviously update or change their own score. They couldn't change at this point the status. It's once it's been marked as compliant by my response has been marked as compliant by the client, then obviously I can't change that. Only the client can change that. So there's workflow control in here, because this status change, we'll see in a minute, there's nothing in the status for question 21 yet. We've got a whole workflow to go through, from a draft response into being submitted, and then into being accepted as compliant or partially compliant or not compliant, etc. So we'll see how that works in a second. So question 20, you will see bidder 1's response that's already been put in at the bottom here. So the compliance argument is there. So this is what bidder 1 has put in to say why they feel, or how they feel, they are compliant to this particular assessment criteria. The score and status have been imposed by the client. The client has the ability to make a comment here, which we'll see under the client section when we go back in a second, but it's obviously greyed out for the bidder. One thing to quickly show you is this link section. So this link section offers us a method for linking out to either external or internally hosted files. So this could also be a website. Now, this file has been stored locally on the file share area and just referenced by in this cell, so that it can launch and open up. The idea being that this is the compliance argument, and this is any supporting information, a picture, and a set of meeting notes, a PDF, or whatever that might be. In this case, it's a PowerPoint. If I actually select this now, it should open up. There we go, and it's not obviously a proper document, but you can see that it's opened up the document on the screen. So let me close that away. So files can be hosted for supporting information locally on the ComplyPro file share and then referenced like this, or this could be a URL to an external document management system, or indeed just a web URL to a website or web address. So you can link out to supporting information using this type of method here. So let's look at question 21 now, because we're going to respond to this as the bidder. You'll see there's no response in the response tab at the bottom. So if we right click as the bidder on question 21, we can add our response from the menu that appears. If I click on that, I've now got a line here where I can fill in the required information. So I can put in my compliance arguments. Okay, not very inventive, but it's the principle that counts. My compliance argument. Now, my status is, if I double click in here, because this is a drop down, I actually got to submit this at the top section of the screen by double clicking in the box at the top. You'll see now as part of the workflow that I've got the choices of leaving this in a draft status, okay, and then I could save it off and I could come back and I could work further on this compliance argument tomorrow or another day, or somebody else could have some input. But at such time as you want to push this response and submit this response back to the client, then you can just simply move it on to a proposed status. Okay. Once it's been proposed, then it will now be, it'll become visible to the client to assess that response, possibly put a comment back to you, or to counter the response, or to obviously score it and assess it for compliance to their assessment criteria. So I'll obviously propose this response now, because we're going to go back across and pretend with a client in a minute and then take this further. But do note that when I try to change this further, it's now been proposed, but as the bidder I can't take it further beyond the proposed stage. Similarly to the scoring, I can't change the score at all, it's greyed out. So that will change a little bit later when we come back in to the client in a minute. So we said there was a client comment before, and we said there was some supporting information area before in here as well. So if I could put in here, let's put in ComplyServe.com. Okay, so this is a link, and I can offer this out as a piece of supporting information if need be. It doesn't have to be a website, as I mentioned. It can be a URL pointing to a document management system, or file on a document management system, or a locally hosted file. Okay, so now I've submitted my response to this question, but I'm very quickly going to also ask a question back of the client. So let's find another question here that we want to respond to, or ask a question about. Let's make this question about question 22. I know we've already responded to this here, but this principle is we haven't yet asked one. So as the bidder, if I want to ask a question about this question, I select the question, but now I change my tab at the bottom from my response tab to the clarification question tab. Then I can right click, and instead of creating a response, I can create a question. So if I do that, it pops up at the bottom, and I can ask my question here. It's also got a workflow associated, so I will, I can leave it in draft and work, carry on thinking and working about it and submit it whenever I'm ready. I can now submit that, and then we can review that as the client. Obviously, you can't put in a response you wouldn't want to. You're asking the question in the first place. And I'll demonstrate this access functionality to you shortly when we come back as the client. So we've now been the bidder. We've put in a response and we've asked a question. So now let's go back across and let's be the client again. Right, now we're in as the client. Let's go through to the assessment progress for this work package that we're working on. Okay, you'll see on here that question 21 has now got a proposed response. It's not yet been scored, and has not yet been marked as compliant or not compliant, etc. So what we can do is look at this, look at the response. By highlighting the question, we can look at the bidder's response. So here's bidder 1's response. We've just put that in and proposed that. And look, here's the supporting information. If I click through, it'll obviously open up our website. So if I now evaluate this and I think, oh great, that's yep, they can do that. It's 100% compliant to what we want them to do. I can now, as the client, take this further. You see, this couldn't be seen before. I'm very happy, so it's going to be compliant. If I wasn't so happy with it, it could be partially compliant or not compliant. Once it's been made partially compliant or a status has been given, you'll notice when I click back in here, I can actually modify this between a non-compliant or a compliant choice as the client, but I can't go back and put it back as proposed. I can just change the level of compliance. I can also give this a score. So let's just say I'll give them 2 out of 3 for this response. It's not perfect, that's why it's partially compliant, but I'll give them a score of 2. So then, I can give the client, sorry, the bidder a comment back. I say, this could be, it could be whatever, but I can place that comment back so that it'll bring it to the bidder's attention. Any further information about this particular query. Now, so that's how the response works. It's fairly straightforward, but if you recall, we also asked a clarification question. So there's 2 areas I can see these. I can get to any particular clarification question by looking at these columns at the end. I can see that a clarification question has been submitted regarding this particular assessment criterion. I can even link through to that clarification by clicking on the link here. Similarly, I've got activities at the top here to take me straight to the log of clarification questions for the client and the log of clarification questions for bidder 1. So these are other buttons that bidder 1 would see, tender bidder 1 and clarifications bidder 1. That's all they would see when they logged in. Now, as the client, so I can see I can click through on here and it will take me now to the log of clarifications. That's exactly the same for me as clicking on the clarifications client log here. So it has the effect of doing the same thing. So as the client then, I can see submitted questions in here. It's I should probably point out as well that you've got a filter capability at the top of the screen. So in a great big log with lots of questions, I can have sort of email alerts set up to say you've got a new submitted question at, on a schedule at the start of each day, or I can just look at this log and I could look for either submitted responses in the assessment tab or the clarifications log for submitted questions. So if I do that, I can look at the status and I can, let's just search for, so submitted filter, and I can just bring up submitted questions just like that. Now, I can turn the filter off again by clicking the button, but I will be able to respond to this submitted question. So, whatever your answer is, I can modify this to now responded to alert obviously the bidder that their question has been responded to, and I now have the choice here as the client of restricting the this clarification response to either making it available to everyone or just to one or another of the bidders. So I could restrict this response just to bidder 1 by saving off the saving that in the access level here. So if I save all of the work that I've now done on here, I've answered the clarification question and I've completed the assessment of that response that bidder 1 made, then the system would be updated. It is necessary to save in ComplyPro. It will prompt you just like anything else if you try to close the screen without saving. But there's a couple more, or a few more small things to show you. Firstly, that the difference between the clarifications for the client and the clarifications for the bidder. We're looking at the client one now, and you'll see that as the client I can see the detail of the questions and responses for all, whether it's bidder 1, 2, or for everyone. However, if I look at that for bidder 1, you'll see that this has disappeared. Switch between them again. So obviously that with bidder 2 showing, because I can see everything as the client. But if I look at that for bidder 1, a question and response that's been marked for bidder 2's eyes only will not be shown to bidder 1. So that's managed by this access field at the end. So just taking it back to the set of metrics that we started at. So you can see the progress here of all of the work packages. So we've actually completed now. We'd started off at the beginning that 14 were done and that 2 were not done, but we've now progressed it. We've answered one more question on here that's now been responded to, so it's now showing us that 15 are done and 1 is not done from this log of, for this particular work package, and we can see obviously for the other work packages how complete they are at this particular point in time. So essentially that's it for the ComplyPro tender assessment. Now, lastly, do bear in mind that what I've shown you isn't necessarily how you have to do your tender assessment if you use ComplyPro for this purpose. You can structure and change and modify everything that you've seen to match your set of processes if and as relevant. For example, we've got a simple setup for the purpose of this demonstration with a simple 1 to 3 scoring mechanism. You might have it as a percentage, you might have it as a 1 to 10, you can have it as just a good, average, poor. You can change that. That's just an example. So everything that you've seen in ComplyPro is not locked down, and we will leave you with the expertise to be able to modify and indeed help you to modify the initial processes that we set up with you. One last thing at the top of the screen, you can move back and forward like you can in a web browser, but you can also generate PDFs. So at the click of this button, I can generate a PDF of what I'm currently seeing on the screen. Let me do that. It will give me a set of choices to choose between landscape or portrait and what I want my header and footer to be. I can then generate the PDF, and that will then come up on the screen, and you will be able to see exactly what that looks like as soon as it pops up. You have to bear with me 2 seconds because I'm working on multiple desktops, and I'll just do that one more time because I think I've lost it behind the other screen. Okay, I do apologise for that. It's not currently letting me drag this across from one screen to the other, but essentially you can generate a PDF of the current view at the click of the button at the top. So lastly then, all that leaves me to do is to thank you very much for taking your time to look through this demonstration. You'll find some contact details on the screen, and as I say, there are a raft of other presentations that in the same style and nature as this one for our other processes, including things like risk and hazard management, specification development, progressive compliance, etc., etc. So I very much look forward to speaking to you further in the future and helping you to use ComplyPro as the system for easing your project compliance. And thank you very much.